Hello, everybody. Welcome to Coastlands Online. My name is Evan Brown. My wife, Lindsay, and I are the senior pastors here at the Coastlands, and I just want to say a warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us today. And today of all days is a bit of an unusual day because I'm going to be explaining this new operational thing that we're launching at our church called Church Reconstructed. It's basically how we're going to be operating as a church between now and when things return back to normal a little bit more. Before we get into all that, though, let me go through a couple of announcements of things that are going on in our denomination and then here locally. Well, the first one I want to make you aware of is our denomination has something called Foursquare disaster relief, and it's kind of what it sounds like. There are people who go to places where there have been natural disasters, and we look how we can provide practical help, how we can provide spiritual aid for those who are affected by those disasters. And so the situation happening in Texas right now, Foursquare Disaster Relief is going into that area and providing help to those folks who are melting snow for drinking water. So if you would like to financially give towards that, you can go to our website under the giving section, and you can find the drop down that talks about Foursquare Disaster Relief, and you can give directly to that effort there. Here locally, we have a couple of things. The first one is our Testify and Glorify banner. It's an opportunity for us to write down the things that we are thankful for that God has done in our lives in this last year, and just having that attitude of, instead of looking at everything that's going wrong, let's look at the things that God has done that are great. And so it's outside here of our sanctuary, and today, Sunday, February 28th, is the last day that you can do it. So do come today if you'd like. We got pens out there, and you can write down a little blurb about what you're thankful for that God has done in your life. And then looking forward, in March, we have the Prayer Walk Challenge that Pastor Steve has been talking to us about, getting out into our communities where we are on the scene but not making a scene, as Pastor Steve said so well. Praying for our communities, praying for our neighborhoods, and seeing what God might do there. That's happening in March. Okay, Church Reconstructed. How are we going to be operating as a church that's different from what we have been doing, and why are we going to do that between now and when things return back to normal? Well, as some of you may know, we've tried quite a few different things. Everything from live streaming from Kevin Cameraman's computer. Our very first live stream, I was using the camera on Kevin's computer in a live stream setup that had a lot more duct tape than we cared to admit, live streaming there. And I'll never forget that people were texting Kevin while I was live streaming, I can't hear this, or this looks weird, or whatever. It was all very nice. But his text came up on his computer. So I'm trying to preach a sermon, and people are texting like, I can't hear him. It sounds weird. His nose looks strange. I don't know, all the things that they were saying. And I had to focus so tightly on the camera and try to not pay attention to all those things. So we've done everything from laptop camera live stream to some indoor services, 6 feet apart, to outdoor services with the whole family together, to kind of everything in between. And now we do a lot of pre-recorded stuff that we then premiere on Sundays. Well, we're going to be evolving what we're doing here as a church, and I want to explain the intent behind the way that we're going to be doing things. The reason why I want to take so much time to explain the intent is because we know that well, there's a lot of opinions about what should and should not be happening. And as we surveyed our church, both through the poll that we sent out and also just kind of conversations that our leadership is having with individuals in our church, it's very clear that we have a pretty diverse set of opinions in our church about just not even what should happen, but what would be helpful for me. If I could say it that way. There's a lot of individual considerations that make trying to do something that satisfies the needs of all these different kinds of people with all these different kinds of considerations. I mean, you can imagine for this number of people, there's a lot of things to consider. Now you put on top of that the regulations that the government has instituted in our area, in our county, and you put on top of that just the logistics of what we are able to do as a church, because we don't have infinite time and resource. So it was kind of a bizarre logistical challenge to solve, and one, I say bizarre because we just never had to do something like this before. But I do think that we've landed on an idea that will at least give something to everyone. It probably won't give everything to anyone, but it will give something to everyone. And it's just a value that I have, guys, that like we really, as much as possible, now it's not always possible, but as much as possible, we are thinking about people that we don't see right in front of us. And especially we're thinking about people who might be quite different than us. That's a kingdom thing to do. And we want to try to do that well. So before I get into the explanation, I just want to ask you to put on that attitude of like, okay, I recognize that there are people at the Coastlands who have different individual considerations than I do. And even though some of this might not be my preference, can I ask you to lay down maybe some of your preferences so that other people can still partake in the life of our church? All right, church reconstructed. It's all dismantled anyway, isn't it? So we're reconstructing this thing. How are we going to begin to reconstruct it? Well, what we did was we looked at a Sunday morning experience, and we broke it down into 3 parts. The first part is the teaching, okay? That happens on a Sunday morning, right? Where you come in and typically you sit down and then you will listen to a teaching. Another element of a Sunday morning experience is the worship. It's the second element. And the third element of a Sunday morning experience is that fellowship, that passing each other in the hallways, having an awesome conversation with somebody, maybe even praying for somebody or being prayed for by somebody else, but otherwise just continuing getting into relationship with other humans who are at that church. These 3 elements, instead of trying to do all 3 of those in some sort of pandemic era, duct tape laden kind of quickly put together kind of a thing, we've decided to separate them out into 3 completely distinct, separate experiences. The idea there is that some people might want to do 1, but not the other 2, might feel like they can only do 2, but not the third one, because they have this consideration or they have this element going on in their lives, and it just kind of means that, gosh, that thing won't really fit into what I'm considering for my life. Or that's not something that is really going to be helpful for me in helping to advance my relationship with God. So that's why we're providing this thing in separate parts. And the idea is that you might take advantage of all 3. You might take advantage of 2. You might just take advantage of 1. That might be where you're at. And all of those options would be perfectly fine. Okay? So these 3 different elements. Let me start with the one that's going to be the most familiar. That's the teaching. This is going to continue to be an online exclusive part of how we are offering church to people. That means that for the in-person gathering that I'm going to talk about in a second, that will not have a teaching component to it. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is there's going to be some people who feel like they can't come in person. They just don't feel comfortable with it, and that is really totally fine. So for those folks who are staying home, we want to make sure that we're still giving that regular diet of good Bible study for those folks who are staying at home. The second reason is, we try to do a couple outdoor services with the kids and the adults, and that was some of the most stressful sermon preparation I've ever done in my life, because it's just so hard not to make someone bored, And then I think my kids were like the most bored of everyone there, so I can't imagine what your kids were like. But as we have an in-person gathering that includes kids, if we take the teaching portion out of it, then I think we're able to provide something that's just going to be a much better experience for everybody if we keep the teaching thing online. Now, one of the cool things about having the teaching be online is that it can be done, or it can be listened to anytime and anywhere. It's all through YouTube, so you might want to go out and garden and listen to the teaching. You might want to be working out, or you might want to sit there on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. and listen to it in the living room like we do. All of those things are perfectly fine. The idea here is we want to get church to you, and we want that part of it to be able to fit into the contours of your life. So we still will be premiering it at 9 a.m. on Sunday morning, but it can be listened to anytime and anywhere. Okay. The second element, worship. Now, the teaching portion that we have been doing, the recorded teachings, they have had a recorded worship element in them. We're not going to be doing that anymore. We are separating them out from one another. Now, don't worry if you're like, no, I have to have worship before I listen to a teaching, otherwise I couldn't possibly remember any of the scriptures that were talked about unless I worship. That's no problem, because in this separate worship experience, we're going to be having a playlist we're calling Worship Anytime. And a part of Anytime could be 15 minutes right before you listen to the teaching. So again, for those of you who are a little bit more traditional, you want to have worship and then you want to have a teaching, that's great. You still can do that in this new arrangement of things. But the Worship Anytime idea kind of has two elements to it. The first one is YouTube recorded songs that the worship team is creating for our church. Now, I don't know if you know anything about recording songs, audio or audio and visual, but I'll just tell you right now, it's like 10 times harder than what the worship team did to prepare, which already was a lot for our normal in-person services that we had before the pandemic. So what we want to do is we want to have this playlist that we can add to over time, but not necessarily every 7 days is there going to be an entirely new worship set. Because we want to give our worship team the space to create these worshipful experiences that, again, you can listen to anytime. I found that washing the dishes and listening to some worship music has actually been some of the most profound worship experiences that I've had in the last year. So we want to provide something to you that you can take advantage of it anytime and anywhere. Another element of that is we're going to be providing Apple Music and Spotify playlists to everybody who wants it to listen to new worship music that different groups of our leaders are saying, hey, this is the worship music I'm listening to, and we'll send you that Spotify playlist. And so you can kind of be listening to what some of the leaders of the Coastlines are listening to, which is a great way to find new worship music that you really like, and I don't know, just kind of do something together. It's kind of like a mixtape. All right, I don't know if any of you old school people out there, but it's like a mixtape. Hey, here's all the songs that I love right now that I'm listening to, and I want to give this tape to you so you can listen to it as well. That's what those playlists are. It's just integrated with apps and technology these days. So we'll have that and instructions about how to take advantage of that on our website. Okay, online teaching, worship anytime, and okay, those are the first two elements. Now, the third element. The third element is the most different from what we have been doing in the past. And so I'm going to spend most of my time talking about that. We are calling it an in-person gathering. Now, we chose that word gathering very carefully, okay? We're not trying to replicate a service. So we're not having a teaching. It's not going to be quite as specific about the time, and the emphasis is going to be way more about worshiping in person and fellowship. So those are the two aspects of the in-person gatherings that we're going to emphasize. So again, I want you to think about this, if that's something that you're really missing right now, or that's something you feel like, man, that would really just help me to be around a bunch of Christians singing worship to our God, then this thing would be something that you could take advantage of. But in not making it a service, again, we're making sure that the people who feel like they would like to stay home, we're making sure that they aren't having, their experience isn't suffering because we moved everything in person, and gosh, unless you come in person, well, then you can't really know what's going on in our church, or you can't get the teachings, or you can't have a Coastlands experience. So that's why we're doing it separate. In addition, we're starting it Sunday morning at 11 a.m. So you could watch the teaching premiere at 9 a.m., make it to the church by 11, and then be a part of the in-person gathering. If you wanted like the closest simulation to what we were used to before the pandemic, that's how you would do it, okay? All right, so this in-person gathering, there's gonna be about like maybe 20 minutes or so of live in-person worship. We're arranging everything so that people are 6 feet apart, and we're gonna be wearing masks the whole time, and so we can worship outside. Now there's gonna be a canopy. Think like a carport, like the world's largest carport is gonna be out here on our front parking lot. And there's no wall, so it's not enclosed, it's just really covering on the top. And then we'll have chairs that are dispersed, 6 feet away from each other, in clusters of chairs in case family units come together. And there's also gonna be tables for families with kids, with activities for the kids at the tables. So there's like 20 minutes or so of worship, maybe a testimony or two, maybe some communion that's done in self-serve solo communion cups. There's some amazing products out there that we found where we can serve communion in that way. But that will be like a pretty short time, 20, 25 minutes. And then what are we gonna do for the rest of the time, guys? Well, it's kind of up to you. We're gonna hang out. That's what we're gonna do. Just talk to one another, sprawl out a blanket on the lawn, bring your own lunch, and eat your lunch. And that's when you can take your mask off. That's the only time we're gonna have masks off is then. Or just hang out, bring a lawn chair or something, a lot more of just kind of a relaxed atmosphere. Now, for those of you with kids, again, we'll have a table with activities for the kids. They can color or do activities, whatnot, while the worship is happening. And then after that, you can take your kids to either the adventure playground for ages 4 and up, or the secret garden for ages 3 and below. Now, it's not gonna be like normal children's ministries where a different person would watch your kids. We're asking that you would supervise your own kids. So you bring them to the playground and you stay at the playground with them. Now the kids, ages, I think it's 3 and up, over the age of 2, we're asking that they also would wear a mask the whole time, even while they're playing around the playground. And so, that's something you don't have to do with your kids. So you can come with your kids and then you can stay in the front lawn that is kind of visually obscured from those play areas. And we were thinking that that might be helpful for, for kids who are seeing other kids play and like they want to go in there, but as a family, you've decided that you don't want to do that. So we're trying to do as much as we can to help you in that scenario. But you might just want to kind of picnic out there and as a family, put out a blanket and have a nice little picnic lunch on the lawn with chairs and whatnot. But if you bring your kids to one of the play areas, then please do supervise them yourself. And there will be other parents there as well, all of us wearing masks and being able to watch our kids play out there. Okay, so when you arrive though, you'll show up at the registration tent. Now this is something that we're asking you would register for. So please do register before you come here. And the reason for that is if we do have a positive case of COVID-19, we want to be able to contact everybody and inform them that there was a case that we were made aware of and to do with that information what you would like to do with that information. So that's pretty important to us, but we're totally making room for walk-ons. So we're doing it in the front parking lot on purpose, that people might see this and be like, hey, God's kind of tugging on my heart. There's this church, there's a big carport out there. Sounds pretty cool. I'd love to come and see what this is all about. So we're making room for walk-ons, but for those of you regular attenders of our church, we would ask that you would register, even just so we know how many chairs to put out, because we kind of have no idea how many people are going to come to these things, and it might change week to week. So please do register. That would be very helpful. So you'll walk up after parking and we'll take your temperature as you come into the outdoor area where we have everything. And then you'll be chatting with people, very relaxed, and then find a seat when it's time for worship. Again, we're asking people to wear masks the whole time. Now the reason for that is the guidelines are if you can stay 6 feet away outdoors, you don't need to wear a mask. But the problem is that we're going to be passing each other, all in this kind of designated area. It's not going to be tight, but I think it'll be small enough where we're just going to be passing people. And I think you and I both know that when you see two people talking to each other, in order to hear each other, you get closer and closer until you're not 6 feet apart. So that's why we don't want this to be a thing where we have to police everybody. Like, you're not 6 feet apart, you're not 6 feet apart. So I think the easiest way to do this is just have everybody wear a mask while you're singing, while you're talking with people, unless you're out there with your lunch and you're eating your lunch, then you can take a mask off, just like eating outdoors at a restaurant right now in our county. Okay. Youth, what's happening with the youth? Similar to the kids, we asked that the youth would stay with their parents during that worship time. And we're kind of figuring out what we might be able to do specific to the youth, but I think we're gonna just try this out to kind of have the youth be with the adults, pretty much the whole time for now, and we'll see how it goes, and maybe we'll have some youth-specific activities that happen from here on out. Okay, in-person gathering, worship anytime, online teaching. These are the three different elements of Church Reconstructed that we are wanting to provide to you. Our heart in this is really thinking about and praying for your needs, what you need in your relationship with God, and within all of the different constraints that we have, that we would provide this stuff for you. I want to emphasize that for those of you who may not feel comfortable coming in person, it is really okay. It doesn't mean you're not a committed Christian. It doesn't mean you're not a part of our church. It doesn't mean that God is angry with you or something. This is not a decision you have to make, like, gosh, should I do something that would put me in a medically compromised position, or am I a good Christian? Like, that's not the question that is being posed by this. That is not how we're thinking about it at all. There might be some of you who don't come in person until later this year because of your personal considerations. And I just want you to know that is absolutely fine, and we still think about you. Even though you won't be here in person, we still think about you, and we care about you as much as the people who would come in person. We all are a part of this community and our church, and everybody matters all the same, okay? So please don't let this be something that you feel pressured or like, oh my gosh, like, I want to be a good Christian, but I don't feel like I don't feel comfortable with the details of this in-person gathering. That's really okay. There will be no question, no judgment, no nothing, except that we just love you, we love you, we love you. And whether it's this year or next year, I don't care. I just can't wait to see you again. That's it, okay? So please be released from any sort of pressure on that side. Yeah. These things that are online, I know it's different, but they do have some advantages about the fact that you don't have to be in one place at one time in order to take advantage of them. And that's something that I think is a really good thing. I encourage you to take advantage of that. In all of this, is this the right way to do church? I don't know. Do we hope that people get helped by this? Yeah, absolutely. But no matter how we arrange our church, no matter what the structure is, no matter how cool the idea, no matter how clever it is, no matter how anything it is, unless God is the one who is building the house, then we're laboring in vain. So we have this idea of church reconstructed, but I just want to acknowledge that, like, even within that structure, like, we need God. We need God. He is the reason why anything having to do with church is meaningful at all. He is the only reason why the structure that we enjoyed before this pandemic, God is the reason why that structure of church was useful and helpful at all for people whatsoever. It wasn't because there's something like, special about that structure per se, that, well, that's the only way that people can be blessed in God. Far be it, far from that. No way. So in this temporary new structure of church, we need God. We need God. We're like that little boy, when there was 5,000 plus people that needed to be fed. We're like that little boy with loaves and fish. And we're like, Jesus, could you use this to do all of that? That's what this is to me. I like the idea. We've been really careful in thinking things through. But anything we bring to the Lord needs to be multiplied by Him to accomplish the things that's in His heart to do in you. So let's all just acknowledge that this all is a miracle, that anything great happens in God by anything that we do, and we still need him moving forward. So let's not talk about, is this the right way or the wrong way, or I don't think that's helpful. What I do know is that we need God in what we're offering. So would you join me in praying over this whole thing, this Church Reconstructed, that God would take from it and multiply for his purposes what he will. Let's pray. Well, Father, we come before you here on the edge of a new season, on the edge of doing something new with our church that we really hope in our hearts will bless people. But God, we're coming to you because you are the one whose work is significant. You are the one who causes life to come out of places of lack. You are the one who can create things out of nothing. You are the one who can do with loaves and fish what we could never dream of doing. And so, God, we bring this Church Reconstructed thing to you, and we ask you, Lord, can you use this? Can you multiply our efforts to do something that is so profound that we all know it was God that did it? We seek to glorify you alone, Lord. You alone. May people see you, feel you, know you more in this Church Reconstructed season that we're entering into. We love you, God. Thank you for how much your grace covers us. In your name, Jesus. Amen. Amen. All right. Well, here we go, guys. Here we go. I can't wait to see you, whether it's the in-person gatherings coming up or if it's a year from now. It's really important to me that you know that our whole leadership team, we're thinking about you. Man, we love you. If there's anything we can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, see you soon. Bye-bye.